My daughter showed up with a mark on her arm after lunch with her husband. She brushed it off, saying she had tripped. I wasn't convinced, so I called my son-in-law. His cold response froze me. I hung up, then dialed a different number. If you're reading this story, please share it. Every woman deserves to know she's not alone. And every mother needs to know there's always hope. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always finds a way. My name is Maria Delgado, and this is the story of how I fought the most important battle of my life. Not for myself, but for my daughter and grandson. The late afternoon sun of Phoenix bled through the weathered wooden frame of my craft boutique, a familiar golden light that set fire to the ceramic pottery I'd spent all morning arranging. At 68, this light was a part of me, as was the scent of sage from the hand-woven dream catchers and the distant melodic call of the ice cream vendor on the street corner. I was arranging a set of painted tiles, lost in the simple rhythm of the work, when a shadow fell across the doorway. It was Elena. My daughter entered, her thin shoulders trembling under a long-sleeved burgundy cardigan, the kind she never wore, always complaining they made her feel suffocated even in the mildest weather. She forced a smile that didn't reach her hollow eyes. I was about to ask why she'd come so early, but the words died in my throat. As she placed her leather purse on the counter, the sleeve rode up her arm. There, on the olive skin of her forearm, was a dark, vicious bruise. It was not the messy bloom of an accidental fall. This was a mark, deep and deliberate, shaped with a distinct, brutal clarity of fingers pressed too hard. The unmistakable print of a violent grip. My heart seized, a cold fist closing around it. "What happened, my love?" I asked, my voice a traitorous whisper despite my effort to remain composed. Elena yanked her sleeve down, a frantic, well-rehearsed motion. "It's nothing, Mom," she murmured, her eyes darting away from mine. "I just bumped into the kitchen cabinet." That lie cut deeper than any truth. I wanted to grab her hand, to push back the sleeve and see the full extent of the damage, but I was paralyzed by a terrible fear. If I pushed too hard, the fragile facade she had constructed would crumble, and I wasn't prepared to see what horrors lay beneath. "Sit down, my daughter," I managed, pulling a cushioned chair out for her. "I'll make you some coffee with milk." In the small kitchenette behind my shop, my hands trembled as I heated the milk. Elena had been my sunshine, a daughter whose dreams were as vibrant and beautiful as the artwork in my store. She had wanted a loving family, a peaceful life. Now she was a ghost, thin and silent, harboring a demon in her home. When I placed the steaming mug before her, my eyes remained fixed on her covered arm. Just then, the chimes above the door rang and Diego, my 9-year-old grandson, bounded in, throwing himself into my arms. "Grandma, I got an A+ on my science project today," he exclaimed. His innocent grin a small, warm beacon in the growing darkness of my heart. He was my world, the reason I still created, the reason I still fought. But even his joy couldn't chase away the cold dread settling in my chest. When Elena went to the back room to look at some new inventory, I knelt beside Diego. "Was your dad upset today, my grandson?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The brightness in his eyes dimmed and vanished. He looked down at his worn sneakers and said nothing. A 9-year-old boy doesn't know how to lie convincingly, and his silence was deafening. After they left, their silhouettes disappearing around the corner of Camelback Road, I closed the shop and sat alone in the growing twilight. The colorful ceramics blurred into a gray haze. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. The bruise wasn't from any cabinet. And Diego's silence was the confirmation I never wanted to receive. That night, my finger hovered over my phone. I finally took a shaky breath and dialed the number of Roberto, the man I had once welcomed into my family with open arms. "Mrs. Delgado." His voice came through the line, smooth and condescending. "What do you need?" I cut through his false courtesy. "What did you do to Elena?" A pause, then a laugh, cold and sharp as breaking glass. "So what if I did?" he sneered. "Yeah, I hit her. She needed to learn her place. What do you think you're going to do about it, old woman?" Each word was a physical assault. I wanted to scream, to curse him until my voice gave out, but I hung up without another sound. I would not give him the satisfaction of hearing me break. A moment later, clutching my rage like armor, I made another phone call. The next morning, it was Roberto who was calling me. His voice no longer arrogant, but laced with raw, sputtering panic. The morning after Roberto's frantic call, I stood before my bedroom mirror, braiding my silver hair and wrapping my shawl tightly around my shoulders. Had to be strong. Not for me. For her. Elena stood in the corner of my living room, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mom, you don't have to make this into something bigger," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. I shook my head and took her trembling hand. It was ice cold. "Come with me, Elena. We cannot let this continue." The Phoenix Police Department smelled of burnt coffee and bureaucratic indifference. A fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows on the linoleum floor. I walked directly to the desk of Detective Johnson, a man who had once been a regular at my late husband's auto repair shop, always praising his work and my homemade tamales. Now he looked at me as if I were a nuisance. His attention focused on his computer screen. "Detective," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "My daughter's husband beats her. I want to file a report." I laid out the evidence. The bruise, Roberto's chilling admission over the phone. I looked him in the eye, searching for the decent man I once knew, for a spark of justice. He barely glanced at Elena, who was staring at the scuffed floor, and scribbled something in a notepad. "She probably had an accident," he said, his voice monotone. "Domestic incidents are tricky. Usually just misunderstandings between spouses." My blood boiled. I slammed my palm on his metal desk, the sound echoing through the sterile room. "No, my daughter is being beaten by her husband. Are you listening to me? This is not a misunderstanding." Johnson finally looked up, irritation crossing his features. "Look, Mrs. Delgado, I suggest you go home and handle this within the family. We don't interfere in private marital disputes unless there's serious injury." The words hit like a slap. Elena tugged at my arm, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please. Let's just go." I allowed her to lead me out, each step feeling like surrender. Outside, under the relentless Arizona sun, I made a decision. If the police wouldn't help, I would find another way. We went to the office of Attorney Williams, supposedly the best lawyer in Scottsdale. The office was all polished marble and frigid air conditioning, smelling of expensive cologne and power. I felt like a desert flower in a frozen wasteland. I told our story again, every painful detail. Williams leaned back in his black leather chair, slowly adjusting his gold cufflinks as if listening to casual gossip. When I finished, he looked at Elena with calculating eyes, assessing her worth. "Maria," he said, his voice as slick as oil, "Roberto Torres has influential connections in this city. If this becomes public, the ones who will suffer most are Elena and little Diego." Another door slammed shut. Another wall built against us. I watched Elena's shoulders shake with silent sobs. I helped her to her feet and we walked out, suffocated by the weight of our powerlessness. That afternoon, I accompanied Elena to her house in the upscale Ahwatukee neighborhood. The air in the manicured yard felt heavy, toxic. Esperanza Torres, Roberto's mother, sat in an ornate patio chair like a queen holding court. "Your daughter is worthless," she declared, her eyes like chips of obsidian. "She can't even prepare a proper meal for her husband and child." I wanted to tell her that her son was the worthless one, a monster masquerading as a respectable man. But Elena gripped my arm, her eyes begging me to stay silent. "Mom, please don't." Roberto appeared, straightening his designer tie, the picture of calm authority. "Get inside," he ordered Elena, his gaze on me cold and menacing. "Don't let your mother create drama." I turned and walked away, Esperanza's parting insult following me. An old woman who sells trinkets has no business giving advice to the Torres family. That night, back in my modest apartment, I sat before my husband Carlos's photograph. "Carlos," I whispered to the flickering candle flame, "you used to say justice always finds a way. But where is it now?" I knew then. The justice Elena needed would never come from a system Roberto's money could influence. If the world had abandoned us, then I would have to create my own path. I would have to take justice into my own hands. My husband Carlos had an old friend, a former detective named Ray Martinez. He was a principled, relentless man who now ran a private investigation firm. Carlos had once saved Ray's career by providing an alibi in a corruption case decades ago, and Ray had sworn he owed him a debt. It was time to collect on that promise. I met him in a small cafe in downtown Phoenix, the air thick with the aroma of roasted beans and fresh pastries. Ray was older now, his hair completely gray, but his eyes remained razor-sharp, missing nothing. I poured out the entire story, every ugly detail, every slammed door, every dismissive rejection. He listened in complete silence, his gaze intense and unwavering. When I finished, tears carving paths through the dust on my weathered cheeks, he finally spoke. "I owed Carlos everything," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's time to honor that debt. But this won't be simple, Maria. Roberto is part of a corrupt network. To bring him down, we have to expose the entire system." Ray began his investigation. 2 weeks later, he appeared at my shop with a thick manila folder. In the cramped back room, he spread out the shocking truth. Falsified building permits, bank statements showing money laundered through a bogus charity in his mother's name, receipts for bribes, with payments labeled "Insurance Policy, Detective Johnson." Roberto wasn't just an abuser. He was at the center of a web of municipal corruption, using his construction company to funnel dirty money throughout the city. "We need someone on the inside," Ray said, his expression grim. The answer came immediately. Isabella, Elena's closest friend, and the chief accountant at Torres Construction. She was a good woman trapped in an impossible situation. It was dangerous, but I had to approach her. That evening, I sat with Isabella in my shop, the scent of sage creating a calming atmosphere. I showed her one of the falsified documents. Her face drained of color. "I suspected something wasn't right," she whispered, her hand shaking. "But not this extensive. He threatened me. He said if I ever spoke up, he'd destroy my career and my family." "He is destroying Elena," I said gently. "He is ruining my grandson's childhood. Please, Isabella, help us." She stared at the document, then at me. I saw the terror in her eyes battling with her conscience. Finally, she nodded slowly. "For Elena," she said, "I'll do whatever it takes." With Isabella's insider testimony and the damning documents, Ray prepared a comprehensive anonymous complaint. It was simultaneously sent to the Arizona Department of Public Works, the IRS, and the FBI. The wheels of justice began turning. Days later, the rumors started spreading. I heard them in the grocery store at the community center. They say Torres Construction is involved in massive fraud. An anonymous whistleblower account appeared on social media, posting photos of the incriminating documents. The storm was gathering strength. Then the media descended. A reporter, Jessica Morales from Channel 12, came to my shop with a camera crew. "Mrs. Delgado, there are allegations that your son-in-law is involved in domestic violence. Can you comment on this?" I looked directly into the camera lens. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence spoke volumes. That night, the local news ran the explosive story. The accusations of financial fraud, now linked with whispers of domestic abuse. Elena watched from my couch, her face a mixture of terror and dawning hope. The final confrontation came on a moonless night. Roberto's BMW screeched to a halt outside my shop, its headlights blazing through my window. He stumbled out, his eyes bloodshot with rage and alcohol. his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. "You did this, you interfering old hag," he screamed. I stepped outside calmly, gently pushing Elena back into the safety of my shop. I would face him alone. "It wasn't just me, Roberto," I said, my voice as steady and cold as winter steel. "It was justice. You thought your money and connections could bury the truth, but the truth always rises to the surface." He lunged forward, his face contorted with fury. "You'll pay for this. I'll destroy you and your worthless daughter." "You destroyed your own honor long ago," I replied, standing my ground without flinching. "And I will never allow you to hurt my family again." Neighbors emerged from their homes, cell phones raised, recording everything. He saw them, the cornered predator, realizing the trap had been sprung. He cursed violently, stumbled back into his car, and sped off, leaving only the stench of his desperation. The next morning, Roberto held a press conference. In front of dozens of cameras and reporters, a broken man in handcuffs. He confessed everything. He admitted to the years of abuse. He admitted to the systematic fraud. He announced the immediate dissolution of his company and all its assets. I watched it on my small television, Elena beside me with Diego in her arms. She was crying, but for the first time in years, they were tears of liberation and relief. "Finally," she whispered, "we're finally free." The war was over, but the healing had just begun. The courts moved swiftly once the truth was exposed. Elena was granted an immediate divorce and full custody of Diego. Roberto's criminal empire crumbled to dust. His mother Esperanza left Phoenix with nothing but a single suitcase, her arrogance replaced by shame. Detective Johnson and Attorney Williams were featured in newspaper headlines, their heads bowed in disgrace, their wrists bound by handcuffs. Justice, though delayed, had finally found its way to our doorstep. My life gradually returned to its peaceful rhythm. The shop, the pottery, the familiar scent of sage and clay. But now, Diego was a constant, joyful presence, his laughter filling the spaces where fear once lived. He would bring me his colorful school projects, and I would teach him to paint ceramics. His small hands clumsy but eager to learn. One sunny afternoon, he showed me a drawing of our family. A small adobe house, a woman, a child, and an elderly woman, all holding hands under the vast Arizona sky. "Dad isn't in the picture," he said matter-of-factly, without sadness. I hugged him close, my heart overflowing with love and pride. We had won, not through violence or wealth, but through determination, courage, and a mother's fierce love. A love that had dared to confront a monster and bring him to his knees. Elena found work at a non-profit organization helping other women escape abusive relationships. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. Every woman she helped was a victory against the darkness that had once consumed our lives. Ray Martinez became not just our investigator, but a family friend. He would stop by the shop occasionally, sharing coffee and stories, reminding us that there are still good people willing to fight for justice when the system fails. Isabella received protection in the federal witness program and eventually started her own accounting firm, specializing in helping small businesses stay honest and transparent. She had turned her knowledge of corruption into a force for integrity. As I write this story, sitting in my shop surrounded by the beautiful art that has sustained me through life's storms, I want every woman reading this to know: you are not alone. You are not powerless. Sometimes the system fails us, but that doesn't mean justice is impossible. It means we must become justice. If you are reading this and you recognize yourself in Elena's story, please know that there is always hope. There are people who will fight for you, even when you can't fight for yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust your family. Trust that love is always stronger than fear. My name is Maria Delgado, and I am a mother who refused to watch her daughter suffer in silence. This is our story of survival, justice, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Sometimes, when the sun sets over Phoenix and casts long shadows through my shop, I think about all the women out there who are still fighting their own battles. I think about their mothers, their families, their children who deserve better. And I know that as long as there are mothers like me in this world, as long as there are people willing to stand up and say, enough, justice will always find a way. The truth always rises to the surface. Love always conquers fear. And a mother's fierce protection of her child is the most powerful force in the universe. Never forget that. Never give up hope. And never let anyone tell you that you don't deserve better. You do. We all do. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Every share could reach someone who needs to know they're not alone. Every share is a victory against silence and fear. National Domestic Violence Hotline. 1-800-799-7233. Crisis Text Line. Text HOME to 741741. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Sometimes it's just justice gathering strength.